Well, a very good day to everyone. It's the top of the hour. So welcome to this next session in today's event on how can net zero food system be delivered to the benefit of people and planet. We will focus now for the next few minutes in the supply chain. My name is Ignacio Gavilan. I work for the Consumer Goods Forum. For those of you not familiar with the organization, we basically bring together retailers and manufacturers from across the world for positive change and collective action. So think about all the issues that many of the food and beverage industry, consumer good forum companies, beauty and hygiene as well, face, like human rights, food safety, food waste, of course, plastics. So we get them together looking for positive change. So it is my pleasure today to be here with you. And I want to thank WRAP for inviting me and for the past 5-6 years of great collaboration that I had with them. So we have a fantastic panel ahead of us. Let me just give you a brief introduction before I go into each of the panelists. So according to a number of sources, food waste alone accounts for 8% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. You all know that. A recent report by WWF puts that number at 10. So looking at the big picture, that is a staggering amount of food that doesn't make it to our table, or it does, but still gets thrown away. So it also accounts for almost half of the total greenhouse gas emissions from the overall global food system. So addressing the impacts of climate change and decarbonization within this will require the largest reconstruction of the global economy since the Industrial Revolution, probably. So if you recall from your textbooks, the Industrial Revolution entailed a massive reallocation of capital from agriculture towards industrialization. So decarbonizing the global economy will require a similarly monumental shift towards sustainability and create investment on an unprecedented scale. So decarbonization will be prioritized at different parts of the supply chain, depending on the type of company you are. But if you're in the food business, most likely you have to urgently address things like deforestation, so all the deforestation-free commodities, cooling and refrigeration, of course, logistics, and food waste. So in essence, we will need a very robust means of monitoring progress over time to ensure that actions being taken are having the right effect. So today we have 3 panelists with me. And now that we know about the critical importance of changing the food supply chain in order to deliver net zero food system, I think I want to remind you, please, that this is intended to be a dialogue. So please ask questions. I'll go through a number of questions with our panelists, but it's the best questions usually come from the public. And there's no such thing as a stupid question. The quest of knowledge includes failure, and you should not be afraid to ask. In many cases, multiple people may not know or are afraid to ask, and the one who asks the question may in fact be doing a service to those around them. So let me start by Claire. Claire from Sodexo. Claire and her team are responsible for delivering social value commitments at Sodexo. She began her career in the environmental agency as a lead environmental officer, undertaking issues like pollution prevention, hazardous waste, waste minimization, audits, etc. So welcome, Claire, and thank you for being with us. Let me start with you. I mean, Sodexo, massive company. What are your priorities for action in order to deliver this net zero future, and what is currently being planned, if you can share with us, at Sodexo with your UK operation and of course your international one?
Absolutely. Thank you, Ignacio, and thank you so much for inviting me onto the panel. The sessions have been fantastic, and I very much look forward to supporting WRAP and others to challenge the government to ensure food waste and loss remains high on the agenda, both for COP26 and beyond. So I know the previous sessions, there's been a real sort of mixed bag. Some people have said actually food waste has been highlighted through the summit. Others are saying actually we still very much need that spotlight on food waste so it doesn't get lost. And I agree, we're in a really great opportunity here. So you can see from my backdrop, I'm in Glasgow at the moment, and I can see the city already. They're getting themselves all ready for showcasing net zero and what a city can do. So you've got the electric buses, the electric points. The taxi driver was like, I'm going to get a new wrapper around his vehicle. So there's a real buzz in the city. So it's great to be up here. So in terms of Sodexo, so who are we? So in the UK and I, we employ around 30,000 people. We work with a number of clients across lots of sectors, whether that's sports and leisure, healthcare, professional services, and we deliver workplace services such as technical services, cleaning, security, but also employee engagement and recognition. It's really interesting. So on the panel, we have Robin, who's from Nestlé, and he is both, or he and the company, both our clients, but also our suppliers. So it creates a really interesting dynamic to how we work in this space. So Ignacio introduced the social value perspective, and that's absolutely embedded in how we do business. And you would be right to recognise that social value sits really nicely within the planet pathway. But actually, we have to work through all the impact pathways. So we need our people to be on the journey with us. We need to collaborate with our partners, whether they're our clients, our suppliers, our charity organisations. But we also need to ensure that this journey we're on is fair. So we recognise that there's the levelling up agenda, a just transition, and we want to do that through a localised impact through our places. Net zero, it's massive. And I know, again, from previous sessions, it's actually really complex. And one of the areas that we're focusing on is a real science-based target approach. So those out there are probably very much aware of Science-Based Targets Initiative, or the SBTI. We're working with them to ensure that our commitment follow 1.5 degree trajectory. So currently at the moment, we have a reduction of greenhouse gases by 34% by 2025 for across all the scopes, so scope 1, 2 and 3. That's been validated by SBTI, and I'm really excited at sort of mid-October, we'll be announcing both our near and long-term targets around net zero. It has to be collaborative. If we think about net zero for Sodexo and our impact, so we really understand our carbon footprint. We've been working with the WWF for some years now, and we know that our scope 1 and 2, so our direct emissions, they're 1%. The big ticket is scope 3, and that's 99% of our emissions, and that's where our impact is, and that's where we're focusing. And that's our part of our suppliers, how we work with our clients, how we commute, and so on and so forth. So what we want to do with our suppliers is we want to take them on that journey. Now, in FY20, our suppliers equated to about 27% of our carbon footprint, whether that's purchasing of goods and services or upstream transportation and distribution. So I know we'll be coming on to that later as part of the discussion. What I wanted to get to is around tackling food waste. Now, we have seen the press release from WRAP around greenhouse gases and how important food waste is and that connection with carbon emissions. Now, as an organisation, we produce millions of meals every year, and tackling food waste is absolutely central to our overall mission. And for us to get to net zero, we have already committed to reducing our food waste by 50% by 2025, which is ahead of the UN SDGs. One of the ways that we're doing this is through an initiative called Waste Watch, powered by LeanPath. It's a program that drives behavioural change through data analytics. And we talked around acting fast. So Karen, on previous sessions, talked that, lots of commitments, which is great because we need targets, we need to absolutely understand where we're heading to, but we also need to see action. And as part of the International Day of Awareness around food loss and waste, we were really comfortable to say we've deployed a LeanPath at 200 sites. And because of this, it drove a behaviour change that we were reporting 50% reduction in food waste. We had prevented 280 tonnes of food waste being prevented, and we saved over 2,000 metric tonnes. So again, I suppose it's great to see that action. We were hindered by the pandemic, so we've got a real acceleration of deployment now that we're getting back into a normal but different way of working. In terms of that sourcing responsibly, so there's so much around net zero, and I think it goes back to that complexity. If you think about our sustainability roadmap, I'm sure a number of you guys out there have got a sustainability roadmap. It's how you map it into net zero and how you then focus on what priorities you're going to want to concentrate on. Now, we're a significant purchaser, so we have about 43,000 suppliers, which is significant. And our approach to how we want to procure our supplies and our services is through ensuring that we meet industry marks. So we very much heavily rely on the MSC, the red traction stuff. The other element we look to do is to encourage our suppliers to share their ethical principles, ensure that we understand the sustainability and environmental management practices, and we do that through asking them to sign up to a supply chain of conduct, which again, a number of suppliers are already on a great net zero journey or a sustainability journey, so it's relatively easy for them. What we have to be mindful of, though, is that we work with SMEs, so 43% of our supply chain is actually SMEs, so that's small and medium-sized enterprises. We also have VCSEs as well, so voluntary groups and enterprises, and we want to make sure that they can access net zero as well. So we are focusing on providing skills-based mentoring. So we're a big organisation. We can provide that expertise and through volunteering to actually ensure that they are just as comfortable on their net zero journey, because it goes back to, we can't do this on our own. It sits very much within scope 3, which is very indirect. So we want to influence, we want to collaborate, and we want to showcase what that looks like at a holistic level.
Thank you very much, Claire. I hear you. Scope 3 runs the risk of keeping all of us awake at night over the next few years. So I can see it from both retailers and manufacturers. It's going to be a big thing. Thank you so much, Claire. So let me move to our next speaker now. Robin Sundaram comes from Nestlé. Robin joined Nestlé in the UK in '95 to lead the consumer or the customer service development team, helping set up and drive Nestlé's supply chain collaboration program with several retailers. He leads now the market level implementation and has helped develop a full sustainability strategy for Nestlé's UK and Ireland in things like milk sourcing, aimed at helping dairy farmers reduce their environmental impact and increase the quality and volume of milk supply chain. So welcome, Robin, and thank you for being with us today. So similar question, what are the key priorities for the supply chain, both in the UK and internationally, to deliver this net zero future, and what Nestlé is doing to try to achieve these?
Yeah. Thanks, Ignacio, and thank you to WRAP for the invitation today. The challenge for us is that we have made a commitment that by 2050 we will get to net zero. But we need to do things quicker if we can. So actually, we've said we're going to halve our footprint by 2030, and we're looking to reduce it by 20% within the next 5 years, or 2025, so 4 years, really. And that is a huge challenge for us, but a massive opportunity, because we are a Swiss-based company, but we have operations in 80 countries. We have suppliers in something like 170 countries. And that means that when we've done our analysis of our footprint, no surprise again, 95% of it is scope 3. And to put it in perspective, our footprint is twice that of all of Switzerland. So it's pretty huge. So what that's shown us is that the key areas where we need to focus our energies. And there are 5 that we've decided are the priorities that we need to work on. The first, no surprise really, is 60% of that footprint is in our ingredient supply chain. And our one company buys 1% of the world's agricultural output. So ingredients and farming is definitely the single biggest thing we can do. So regenerative agriculture. So the approach that we're taking both globally and within the UK is well, we need to get, ultimately, it's got to work for farmers. If it doesn't work for farmers in terms of their income, as much as anything else, then it's not going to work. So we have, you have to incentivize farmers. And we've publicly committed to a significant sum of money that's going to drive that. But money alone isn't going to do it. This is about behavior change. This is about farmers really understanding what they have to do to implement and what actually regenerative agriculture is. And there are lots of different definitions, and we've got ours. And so training and getting farmers on board is a big part of that. And then really related to that as well is that a lot of companies are, rightly or wrongly, are looking at kind of offsetting. We're really focusing our energies on insetting as much as we can. So we can either, whether we can reduce our footprint within our farmer base, or if we can, capture carbon from the atmosphere, put it in the soil. But that's the number one focus if we can manage that. So regenerative agriculture is the first. The second is all about transport. No surprise, we're transporting stuff all around the world. So it's about how do we accelerate the move from road to the rail network. In the UK, we're starting to use the railways more. That's the same globally, shipping as well. So it's really looking at our transport operations. The third is very much about our operations in terms of our factories and our offices, and particularly the move to renewable energy. So again, in the UK, we've invested in 2 wind farms, one in Scotland, one off the East Coast, that provides all of our electricity requirement for all of our operations in the UK. So that's already happening, 100% renewable. But that's, again, something we really need to implement globally, and that's really on our kind of roadmap. Then the fourth is all around circular economy, and so both the elements of packaging, we've made commitments around getting to 100% of all of our packaging reusable and recyclable by 2025. As we go through that process, it makes absolute sense to look at how much we're moving things around. Can we reduce our packaging so that we reduce our waste? And so we'll be doing that. And of course, food waste is, big topic, and it's a massive topic for us as well. So again, how do we reduce it? But if we do have food waste, how can we move up the waste hierarchy so that we can get it to people or animal feed or whatever? But ultimately, that the focus on food waste is important, and we're continuing to do that. And then the fifth real focus area for us is about our product portfolio. So if anyone who knows anything about Nestlé, you'll see some of the companies that we've purchased recently have been about alternative proteins. That's kind of the route that we're going, more vegetable based, and that is and we're going to look to accelerate that. But that is, again, that's not a particularly easy job to do. So those are the kind of the 5 big areas. There's a huge amount of work that is going to go into that. I guess for me, there are a few watch outs, and the first really is that, and Claire touched on this earlier, is that this all needs to be science-based. We've got to be able to actually prove that we are actually making a difference. And therefore, and we've got a lot of work going on around that. But the whole kind of, how do we measure, how do we really understand the impact that we're having? How do we verify that impact? That's all part of the process. The other big one that is a big concern, particularly to me personally, but in the company, is unintended consequences of doing all of this. Because as more and more companies go down the road of investing in all of this regenerative agriculture, all the rest is that they're going to be under pressure still to achieve their profit targets. So there may be an incentive there to cut costs elsewhere. And what I don't want to see happening is things like an increase in modern slavery and some of the social unintended consequences from socially that happen because we're focusing so much on the environmental side of things. So that is And so that's quite a big focus for us as well. Again, working with Sodexo, we've joined the Buy Social Challenge, which is about spending money with social enterprises. We know Project Drawdown has shown that of all the different things you can do around this, like I think the sixth biggest is educating schoolgirls. And so one of the things we're doing is from a procurement perspective, we're working with organizations that specifically help social mobility and gender equality. So that social side is still very, very important. So I'm going to stop it there. I know I've been talking, but hopefully that gives you a feel for some of the priorities and challenges that we have.
Thank you so much, Robin. Very useful insight. Before I move to the next speaker, I'll take a bit of a license because I see a question from the public on scope 3. So just for clarification, if some of you are not familiar, we've been talking about the scopes. So greenhouse gas emissions are categorized into 3 groups or scopes by the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, which is the most widely used international accounting tool for this. So scope 1 will cover direct emissions from your own and controlled sources. Scope 2 will cover indirect emissions from the generation of purchased electricity, steam, heating, cooling, etc. And scope 3 includes all other indirect emissions that occur in a company's value chain. So for retailers and manufacturers, most of the emissions, 80–90%, are going to happen in a scope 3, which is your supply chain, your suppliers, your service providers. So I wanted to clarify that because there was a question on the chat. So let me move to the next speaker. I mean, if you've been working on food waste for a few years, Toine needs no introduction. He is a guru and a spiritual guide to all of us. He is program manager, circular economy and food in Wageningen University and research, and the managing director of the foundation Food Waste Free United, the national private-public partnership in the Netherlands. He coordinated both EU projects, Fusions and Refresh, that many of us have used as an inspiration for our work, focusing always in innovation and research in food waste prevention at EU level. So, similar question to the other speakers. Toine, first of all, welcome and thank you for agreeing. How do you see the key priorities for the supply chain to deliver net zero in the context of Europe and across the world, and how Wageningen University is working with the supply chain to encourage change?
Thank you, Ignacio, and thanks for the very kind introduction. And I first want to thank REP for inviting me to join in this excellent panel. We've been working with REP since 2005, so very early stage on food waste prevention, and still very good partners in getting the message across and work on solutions for food waste. To answer the questions from a Wageningen University research perspective, I think we all know that the food system is facing enormous challenges. If we look at the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, almost all of them are connected to our food system. And I think it is crucial that we don't look at the individual problems in its isolation, but to look from a food system perspective. This cannot be mentioned enough, to my opinion. And if you look at it, integral solutions for Wageningen University Research, there are 4 key priorities. One is to have sufficient food for everyone. The second is to support a more healthy diet. The third one, get a more fair food system across the globe. And the fourth one, of course, very relevant for the session today, a future-proof planet. If we look more at the lens of a net zero system, enough food for everyone, just look at the facts. Currently, enough food is produced to feed 12 billion people. But we have to look at the allocation, accessibility, and affordability to make sure that the food is at the right places. But also in the narrative, we don't need to think only about producing more with less, but also see how we can better utilize all the crops. Looking at healthy diets, also there it is clear, if we move to a relatively more plant-based diet, it will contribute to health, and it will also definitely contribute to a future-proof planet. A fair food system, already mentioned by Robin, it has to be, and it has to work also for the farmers. So it has to be an inclusive approach. And the future-proof planet, that is of course clear. If we look at also there, and that's probably also why this conference is called a kind of hidden. If you look at the facts, about 30 to 35% of global greenhouse gas emissions are linked directly to our food systems. But that's not generally known and already mentioned and introduced very clearly by Ignacio. Much of it is in the scope 3 area. So where lies the responsibility of all the actors to work on this, since most of the impact is on the farming and the production side. Drawdown, already mentioned, has very clear ideas of what, suppose we take this net zero approach seriously, what are the realistic solutions that globally has to be worked on. And if you look at the top 3, food waste reduction, or better rephrase it to total use of our products, and plant-based diets are in the top 3 with huge impact. And mostly because since we waste about 1/3 of our food, loss or waste, and newest insight are that it could even be more. If we totally utilize this, means we don't have to spend so much new land, new energy, new fertilizers, etc., to produce what we don't need. So the key elements in an integrated approach are focusing on these 2 elements: total use, reduce food waste, and a more plant-rich diet to utilize everything, and also make sure that we have a good food and healthy diet with a lower footprint. What is key in this also is that we, in the full utilization, I would like to add a 3rd element. And that's where we see a lot of momentum happening currently in Europe, specifically across the supply chain. And that is about the plant-based diet and the circular economy. So what if we, and that is currently still the standard in Europe, that we still have a diet with relatively a lot of animal proteins. What can we do to reduce that, not just by adapting to a less meat consumption, but also make sure that we reduce the footprint of our animal system. And that can be done very instantly by using more of our side flows and more of our side streams. And it has been proven that both for chicken and poultry and pigs, that the footprint can be reduced with 50–60% urgently. But that needs an across supply chain collaboration, including looking at the social elements and involving consumers about telling and showing the benefits of moving towards a more circular system, where also regenerative agriculture will be a part to make sure that we use all of the side streams also from animal production as a fertile component for our full circular system. What is essential also there is that, and that's what we have been doing also in our Dutch approach, in our national sales system, but that is more universal, also being promoted as part of the Courtauld Agreement by the Champions model. It all starts with the target, measure, act model. Being transparent is a crucial element of meeting these ambitions. And many organizations have shown, and it's also mentioned by others, if you are transparent and start doing the measurement, that's already the best intervention to start and working on reducing food waste, for example, as an important element. Looking at the scientific side from a larger perspective, there's a lot more that can be done, of course. It's not one solution, it's multiple solutions. What I'm very hopeful about is that the role of data and transparency can mean. We are still, and hopefully at the end of the pandemic, we see that in the health sector, and that's where we can learn a lot in the agri-food sector, by having standards on data communication, by having standards about how to use a fair system to get access to information, the development of the vaccines has been going much faster than in a traditional way. If we, and I think we should, want to make a food system that's fully sustainable and circular, having a connection between supply and demand based on more accurate data is an essential thing we have to work on. In other sectors, this is already organized. I think as a supply chain, if we could share more data, but do it on a good way and a good governance model, I think it is key to make a system that is fair, sustainable, circular, and working towards a net zero system. I would like to stop there as a beginning and hope to get some further questions in the future. So back to you, Ignacio.
Super. Thank you, Toine. Thank you as always. Good. So now that we heard from the three panelists, going from food service to food manufacturing to academia, I would like to initiate the Q&A session. I can also see some questions on the chat, but let me start probably with you, Claire. What do you think are the biggest challenges in addressing the priorities that you mentioned and that have been identified on this net zero journey or decarbonization journey?
I think for us, I'm just listening and I've been scribbling my notes down. Robin and Toine, you know, really great insight. But fundamentally, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, regenerative agriculture, circular economy. We have so much language and jargon that we understand, but how do we get everybody to understand it? We've got decarbonisation, net zero, carbon neutral. Surely that's all the same, is it not? And actually just having really clear non-corporate language so that it's accessible for everyone. Because actually what we want to do is, and Toine said it, be very transparent, be very clear, be very comfortable that everybody is working at a very much a level playing field that's science-based, that's a clear methodology, and everyone understands where we all sit within this space. It's going to take a lot of different workshops, and I think we'll have to extend out to the academic world, WRAP, WWF, clients, to say, you know, how do we want to work together so this feels something that's attainable, rather than we could talk a lot about this and then never get to the action. And actually that's what COP26 is all about, action and driving some fantastic proof points. So I really feel for our supply chain, not only through a, wow, we've got to do this, because if you think about net zero, it's not really there globally, but in the UK, there's such a focus on net zero that they basically have to do it. And from a procurement perspective, we want our suppliers to be successful. And if you want to procure, particularly government contracts, you've got to make a net zero commitment. You've got to understand your carbon. You've got to understand your emissions across all three scopes. We're lucky, Nestlé's lucky, we're lucky. We've got fantastic individuals that help us to get that data. We need to make sure that everyone else accesses that ability to understand their data, their impacts. And then once they do that, they can then understand their targets and commitments. If you don't have that piece, then you're just going to really struggle to do anything.
Good. Yeah, very true. Very true. So any reaction, by the way, to this question by the other two?
I tell you what, I couldn't agree more about the language. It's so complicated for people outside of the industry. And if there is a way to make it simplify it, I think everyone needs that.
Yeah, no, that's that. We commissioned a study that I recommend to everyone on not only on the panel but beyond. It's called The Honest Product, and we did it with Futera, with a company in the UK, and it basically talks about the logic and the magic. So we have the logic, we have all these wonderful terms, long acronyms, the scopes, and all of that, but we completely lose the magic to communicate with the consumer. Consumer is lost. There's a degree of mistrust on everything we do as private sector, etc. So I think this is a very technical topic, but we need to distill it into things that people understand and relate and can help us. There's a question on behavior and change. Unless we send a strong message to consumers about sustainable diets and why this is important, they're just going to think it's some sort of delusional thing that we created to keep ourselves busy. So I fully agree with that.
Can I add something to that, Ignacio?
Absolutely.
Because I think you're raising a very important point. And we have just gone through the UN Food System Summit process, of course. And what we found, and that's also in several parts of the world, is that the next generation, so the young people, they understand it. And they are sending out strong messages, and they are telling like food waste, that is not something of that should exist. And they are driving maybe even more the stronger change towards that narrative. They understand that it is good to be food waste free. of course, they need also how to get a role and a position to help change the food systems, and they are the future customers, of course. And I think another important point, the same discussion is happening all around the world. I think the food business and the whole supply chain should more collaborate and claim a position on the table on climate, because at the moment, nobody is claiming that position as a group. And that is also because everybody's claiming the science-based aspect, but in most, and I think that's a stupid thing, is that in the climate discussion, it's a global issue, of course, and greenhouse gases don't limit to borders, but we kind of split up this whole discussion, the technicality to country level. And I think that's also one of the statements made by REP in the conclusion. We need to think globally on this, and scope 3, but also the production inputs in parts where we source our food from need to be included in this discussion. And if we do that collectively and show that we are part of the solution, then we can claim a position. And I think another point is, also looking at food waste, the investment costs for society are so much lower than the solutions that's currently on the table. We calculate that for food waste, it is maybe 2 to 3 euros per ton of carbon that should be invested to prevent and reduce it, while currently there's discussion about 50, 60 euros per ton. That is not necessary. We can make much more impact with our food system, but we have to claim this position and make a clear narrative on it.
You said 56 or 5 to 6?
50 to 60. If you look at carbon sequestration or carbon collection from the chemical or fossil fuel industry, I think that's end of pipe solutions. While we have a sustainable and long-term solution that's costing far more or less, also because people understand it.
I think just to build on that, what Toine was saying in terms of the biggest challenges I see to your question, Ignacio, is that next generation piece is important, because the average age of a farmer is 59 in the UK. I think it's 60 globally. So how do you really engage them, and how do you get the next generation involved? And one of my farmers, his granddaughter said to him, "But Granddad, why have I never seen any birds on your farm?" And that was the moment for him. That was the trigger. It's going to be different for different farmers. The other big challenge is an internal one, which is around people generally are used to, what's the return on investment? Yeah, what's my market share going to be? They're used to hard numbers. Here we're talking about nature, and we're talking about things that are really hard to measure at the moment, and it's going to be long time. You know, you don't suddenly change your organic matter in your soil overnight and your carbon. So there's an internal piece about getting people to understand that return on investment isn't how you would normally see it as well.
Good. Okay. How do we keep building momentum on this? What happens after COP? In other words, we hope to get a good push from COP, but how do we keep building momentum within the industry, at least food beverage industry?
I'm hopeful that COP will really start to highlight for consumers in general and just people in the country exactly why all of this is important. I know a lot of people are aware of it, but I think hopefully this is really going to bring it up the agenda big time. I mean, for me, it's a combination of things. There's quite a lot of work going on, but kind of in pockets. So how do we really start to bring it together, that collaboration piece? And we're working on an approach called Lens, where we are working with other players within outside of the food industry. So it's about shared investment with farming. So we're working with water companies and house building companies and retailers who all invest together with the farmers on regenerative agriculture, because they're all looking for different outcomes. It might be supply chain resilience, it might be a water outcome, it might be a carbon outcome, but ultimately the farmers are still doing the same work, but you share the investment across industries. And that's a way to scale it. And that's definitely one of the approaches we're taking.
I think the beauty of RAP very much is around the ongoing campaign around food systems and food waste. So love food, hate waste. The consumers are starting to really recognise that campaign. And therefore, next year with the Food Waste Action Week, what better way to then continue COP26, nice little sizable chunks, keep it on the radar, keep it on the agenda, but also start showing proof points. So people get bored of hearing commitments and this is what we're going to do, and actually what we have to be able to demonstrate is this is what we have done. We've got the platform, this is now what we have done. And I think sometimes we try to go too big, like net zero, sustainability, they are big now, we've made them really chunky, and creating sort of those localized impacts, not just data but also great stories. The public can get their arms around it and start to understand what that means, and then start looking at their own, their communities that they work, they live in, and they want it to thrive. How can we make this happen through using, whether it's a business or the individual? Greta has done such a fantastic job of showing how an individual could make a change, but certainly from the youth COP26 as well, you could really see that, I think she said it herself, people haven't got bored of me, and whilst they're not bored of me, I'm going to continue to have this message. It's the future generation. Hold, us and everyone else account, because if we don't do something, then we've seen from the IPCC that it doesn't look good for anybody.
Super. Thank you.
And I guess on adding to Claire's point, we just organized the Food Waste Free Week in the Netherlands with over 130 parties, and millions of Dutch consumers were activated to do something, because this is something they can actually do themselves. But what I think is more important is the transparency. We were able to publish a benchmark for all Dutch retailers just last year, showing what is normal in the business to have as food waste. This drives immediate change because everybody wants to be better than the next benchmark that we will publish this year. So that leads to change. But as a consequences, it leads to change now to the bakery sector. So all industrial bakers are now in the same model of measuring and making a benchmark that will be published in November this year. Knowing that on average in the Netherlands, we are typically a Dutch fresh bakeries consumer. So we produce every day 600,000 breads more than is consumed. So getting that insights, and now the retailers are working with the industrial bakers to see what can we do to prevent this to happen. And so we go sector by sector towards, and in the champions, we call this like the 10 by 20 by 30. So what if the big companies start to work in a positive way in the target measure act model with their suppliers? And we see that happening at the moment. And that, of course, should be further encouraged, also because it brings benefits to the system and to the individual companies.
Super. Thank you. Let me go now through the questions from the public, and we have a bit of a challenge because we have 7 minutes and 15 questions. So I'll ask you to be very quick in your answers. So let me start with you, Claire. What does Sodexo support how do you work with your catering clients to reduce food waste, and what are effective food waste measures to use with them?
So with our clients, and you would have seen from the introduction, we've got a real breadth of clients, and it goes back to what we said earlier, that actually we have to work with the clients because actually they may want to do something different around food waste. Our focus always is on prevention. So do we need to produce it in the first place? And we've always done that, whether it's food, plastics, from a commercial perspective as well, it makes sense. We don't want to overproduce. We don't want to, put things in the bin because it's an additional cost to then dispose of it and so on and so forth. So it does make good business practice sense. The other part is around, there's so many other initiatives out there. Can we do, so if the food waste is produced through planning, the consumers haven't turned up for whatever reason, can we use other redistribution schemes? So we have a great relationship with Fair Share and Trussell Trust, which goes back to the whole social value element as well. So we have those individuals that can't access good food on a regular basis. We have the ability to provide food to those communities. Can we use other distributions? At the moment, I know we've got some challenges around allergens, but in terms of the Too Good To Go and the magic bags, can we use that, and so on and so forth? So there's lots of different ways that we can cut it for food waste, but it has to go right back to the beginning. Why are we producing it in the first place? but that's only a small part. So once the food waste is there, but no one looks at the holistic food system. So to produce the food in the first place, the whole farm to fork piece, I think we're just missing a real opportunity to take the consumer on the journey to produce the food that you have in front of you. This is the carbon the sort of footprint of those products. So I think there's a lot of consumer awareness that's needed to support some of those clients to make true change.
Super. Thank you. So Toine, Robin, classic question, the role of government. What do you think governments should do in all of this to encourage decarbonization of supply chains?
For me, it's sure they have a key role to play, but looking just at this total use principle, we also work with our hundreds of stakeholders, like what are the key barriers to support a circular economy? And a clear list of 10 priorities was taken from that. And partly is legislative barrier, to remove legislative barrier that the circular economy can exist. Just mention it, one example is that a lot of side streams, for example, from animal products have to be destroyed by law. 20 years ago, there was a reason for that, but that's no longer present now. It should be removed, and it will gradually be removed. But then again, this is also a role for businesses in their communications to also start working on that, because we are used to the principle that, and that's typically Europe, that our pigs and our chicken are fed on a vegetarian diet. Naturally, they're not. So these are the type of issues. If we can tackle that, we can take millions of tons of product that's currently going to waste, not because it's legally necessary anymore, but to allow that. And that asks for a broader societal discussion, like, is this normal, or can we go back to where we came from and build a more circular system? So sometimes the government has a role to play, and of course, in getting more up to creating the level playing field to make sure that the better performing systems and companies are being rewarded. And they, of course, have the public role in education and campaigning. You cannot expect first from the companies to start a big national campaign. That is something that government should invest in also, with good profits, good return on investment, looking at the societal impact.
Robin, one minute.
Yeah, I totally agree with Toine. I think the government has a massive role to play in this, but it does need to be, any regulation needs to be properly thought out from a holistic perspective. So you get it wrong and you just get unintended consequences of the regulation you put in. So that it just needs to be holistic in its approach. Easier said than done.
Well, excellent. Thank you very much. You guys are rock stars. The chat is booming, so we have a lot of work after the session because we need to go through some of these questions. So thank you very much, Claire, Robin, Toine, for such a thoughtful debate. The questions that we didn't get through will be answered by the speakers over the next couple of days and put on the event website. The recording of this event will also be posted if you would like to listen to the session again or catch up on the other sessions or share with your colleagues at the office. In 10 minutes at the top of the hour, wherever you are in the world, there will be another session that will explore the priorities for the citizens in this case, and has an excellent lineup of speakers as well, from Unilever, from the EAT Foundation, from Google, and from WRAP. It will be moderated by Dana Gunders from Refed. Your existing Zoom link will work for this session, so nobody go nowhere. Stay on this same Zoom link, and right after this, you will see a holding slide for a few minutes prior to the next session that will start promptly on the hour. So thank you very much for taking the time to join this 4th session of this conference, The Hidden Hero. How can a net zero food system be delivered to benefit people and planet? And I really do hope that you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you very much.